Hey guys, how are you both doing tonight?
Oh, great.
Doing well.
Awesome. So this is AJ Johnson. He is Ryan's friend. They've known each other for a while now. How long have you guys known each other?
I don't know.
Since 2004, when I worked at Clifton Comics and Games, and AJ came in and played. What was that game called, AJ?
It was the post-apocalyptic one, right? What was that called? It was a role-playing game. I wish I knew the name of that character.
It was, yeah. It was it used third ed rules, I think, because of the D20 open OGL.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh wow.
Back in that era of like complete mess. Okay.
It was not a mess. Third edition is perfect. We've already discussed how I met Tweet, the creator of Third Ed, and I rode bikes with him.
No, yeah, that's a great story. Doesn't change what third edition is, but glad you guys have known each other longer than I have been married. So that's cool. We're going to talk about painting and mini painting tonight. So Ryan's going to take the lead on that. I do see that Ryan has a new favorite game that he switched out even before we started recording tonight. So you want to talk about that now or at the end, Ryan?
Well, I switched it out because I originally had Frostgrave, which is a miniatures game, and I had some terrain up there, but this book fell twice, and then it broke my painted terrain. So now I put up this beautiful copy of Wasteland Express that Christopher has recently gifted me, and it's a game to be played amongst friends, and we're all friends. So this waits, rub it on this side so you can see it. This waits for us to be able to sit down and play it together. I haven't played it. I've opened it. I've read most of the rule book. I watched a YouTube playthrough, not put out by our friend. That's where you come in with John's name.
Oh, John LaRufa. I don't know that John would do a playthrough rules of that one, but yeah. Viewers and listeners, we are having some internet problems somewhere tonight, but we're just going to follow up with where Ryan was.
Talking about friendship.
Yeah. Ryan was saying that when we finally can sit down together, we'll get to play Wasteland Express together. And then you mentioned that John LaRufa might do a run through video of it, and I said I was doubtful of that because John's more like solo games and
polos. They were wearing polos. I watched a video with the people wearing polos.
The people wearing polo. What are you talking about?
It's a really nicely edited playthrough videos, and they probably are very respectable. Their video was very nice, and they wear blue polos that are branded instead of like what we wear.
Instead of
it wasn't John, is my
point. Okay,
my shirt's on inside out.
Oh, your shirt's.
I don't care.
I have no idea what we're talking about anymore now. Okay, so you started to watch a Wasteland Express video and you didn't finish it, and then guys were the nice gentleman.
No, I did.
Okay, we're wearing polo.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I watched it. I know how to play. The whole point is John didn't do a video, so I had to watch somebody else. Okay. That was the whole.
Okay.
The whole gist, and then my shirt's on inside out because we don't have branded stuff yet.
Actually, I was just starting to work on a T-shirt. I want to make a T-shirt, but I need to know what people are interested in. So I don't know.
Well, AJ has his fingers on the pulse of pop culture and what people want. So, AJ, what do you think people want from a T-shirt?
Before we get to our real question, what gaming related T-shirt would you wear, AJ?
I don't wear T-shirts.
Oh, you don't?
No.
What polo would you wear?
Not even as an undershirt?
Not usually, but sometimes. It wouldn't matter what design I had on it. It was an undershirt, to be fair. Let's see.
something Star Wars every day. Just because someone else can't see it doesn't mean that I'm not wearing it.
Yeah.
Force is still with you.
What
about gaming branded sweater vest?
Oh, I would definitely
cardigan.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. That's my jam. Cardigans all day, every day.
Very
like
cool.
if we put the logo on the leather patch on the elbows.
Oh yeah, now you're talking.
All right. So Ryan, I'm gonna go ahead and let you take the lead on the questions tonight, and I'll jump in here and there more like you do. Of course, I can't copy you exactly, but go for it.
Well, AJ, what got you? So we're talking about miniature painting tonight. Which are there any to start off with? Is there any like works that you're proud of that people could see anywhere?
I don't know if I'm proud of it, but I know you're leading towards yeah. If you look on the 40K website and you look at Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns, you'll see a pretty cool Gay Pride Magnus there, rocking it. So some nice rainbow wings, cool horns, doing some good work. I think I don't think a lot of my stuff's online anymore, unfortunately, but that is one of them.
It's on the 40K webpage, gamesworkshop.com. Yeah, there's like some work. I'm like super proud of it, but it's there.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Do you have an Instagram or anything that you're on?
I do have an Instagram. It's not updated. I don't think I've posted there in like 2 years. So
okay. Well, maybe we can help you take some nice photos sometime and update it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You do have a fully painted 40K army, though, right? With that Primarch. I think I've seen it on the table.
It's not fully painted, but it's pretty close to fully painted. Yeah. I wish I actually might have some stuff. I can send some pictures, and we can put them up later.
What army is that? Not that I know much about 40K, but
it's Thousand Suns with Zinch demons.
Okay.
So, and all the Zinch demons are in very fluorescent colors, like actually fluorescent colors. So they're all super bright, and it was cool.
Like fluoresce, like rocks. Like if you turn on the black lights, they turn different colors.
I assume they would do that under black light, but more just like fluorescent pink, like the sort of neon colors.
Okay. Sure.
I was in a
Do
painting.
you think basing's important?
Say that again, Ryan.
Do you think basing's important for your minis?
Yes, basing is extremely important for your minis. They look unfinished without basing. You have to base them. They're not really painted until they're based. You have to do this. I'm sorry.
So, for those who don't paint minis or just
should I grind up?
I'm just taking the step back, pretending I don't know what basing is. Those who don't know, what is basing?
So a miniature comes usually on a base because it can't support itself generally. Although some of them can, but usually they come on a little plastic base, and you would want that base to sort of exhibit features of a terrain for the army or miniature that you're painting. So yes, it's extremely important. My Thousand Suns are based with a combination of like crushed gemstones, like opal and stuff, and like some pink grass tufts and stuff like that. So they're pretty outlandish.
I've seen people use like aquarium plants that are cut up and things like that. Basing can be a lot of fun in itself.
It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
AJ's basing on his army is ridiculous. It's amazing.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. The Thousand Suns also have the cut up. They have like vertically aligned cork, or not cork. It's actually like pine bark. Pine bark's a great basic material. You get it from the hardware store for $3 for a lifetime supply. You break it up. It looks just like stone, like slate. It has a lot of sort of variations. And then on my Thousand Suns, they're sort of aligned vertically. So you have this like cool, like thin spires sort of just like these blue slate rocks running through this sort of prismatic and terrain. So yeah, they look pretty cool.
Sounds very cool.
So as a house painter, if I wanted to move into miniature painting, what would be the way that I could do it the most successfully with the least amount of effort?
So, thank you for the very narrow question there. So the first thing is, it's like anything else. If you want to get good at it, you have to do it, right? So there's not any way around that. And I think it's not only that you have to do it, like if you want to get good at painting miniatures, you have to paint miniatures. You have to do it with the intent of improving. Like, it's mastering like any other skill or hobby. It's a combination of putting in the hours with the willingness and the mindset to improve on that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry there's not a more interesting answer, but the way to get good at basically anything that's like a skill or a hobby is always the same. It's like, well, you got to do the thing and try to get better at it. there's not any way around that.
Well, what keeps you coming back? I was just going to ask, what keeps you coming back when it does get boring? How do you keep going?
I mean, I don't paint nearly as often as I used to, because what drove me for a long time was like, when I started sort of wanting to get better at miniature painting, like, I was like, I can paint pretty well. You know what? It'd be cool if I could paint like super good. And so, like, for a long time, I was really driven by that pursuit of mastery. And once I achieved like a level that I was basically comfortable with, which, like, is, to be fair, not like a top tier, but it's like, it's pretty good. um Once I got to that point, that sort of instinct for mastery has sort of declined. And so now when I go back and I want to paint a mini, it's more that sort of, I want that meditative process and that sort of like attention to detail where I can just sort of zone out for hours and just work on something that I'm like innately, or I've built the skill for.
Mhm.
And that's a very enjoyable experience, I think, sometimes. I don't paint too often right now, and that's partly just because I don't really have like a dedicated hobby space right now. And I think really, I think that's super important, is that if you want to get good at it, if you want to have paint regularly, or have a sort of commitment to getting like a project finished, that there's a sort of space, and it doesn't have to be huge because mini painting doesn't really take that much space, but there's a space that's here. This is what it's for. I can sit down here and do this thing.
Yeah.
If you have to like move stuff around and set up every single time, and it's not always in the same place, that's a hindrance, because a lot of times when you're like, I'm in the mood to paint, and you have to spend 20 minutes getting everything ready, you're gonna be like, all right, well, I'm not really in the mood to paint. I don't want to do all that work.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's a
Time for Netflix at that point.
What were you gonna say when I asked that question, Ryan?
Oh, I was gonna say, I've actually asked AJ before how to get better as a painter, and when he was saying that's what he said the last time, and I was as disappointed the last time as this time when he retold me, because I forgot. But
Yeah.
but I do remember I did make a conscious effort, and I'm going to do it again to try to be better, and I definitely did learn some tricks instead of just like slapping on paint, a wash, a highlight. But you got to find the right model, you know.
Well, I think each time you set out to paint, if your goal is to improve, you want to pick like one thing that you want to work on, or one little thing that you just want to do better than you have before, or at least attempt it. Or even if you haven't done it before, attempt a new thing. You want to experiment and practice. And so sometimes, like when I was like really into sort of pursuing like just getting better, like I'd be like, all right, well, this model I'm going to do OSL, or this model I'm not only going to do OSL, I'm going to focus like a lot on these sort of far-reaching, like the really tertiary lighting effects of OSL. Like,
what is
like
OSL?
little small things. Sorry, what?
For those who don't know, what is OSL?
OSL is object source lighting. So if you have in a miniature, if you have something that would be a light source, and you paint that light source on to the miniature itself as if it was emitting light, and often it's sort of like a colored light. So if you have like a glowing orb, it could emit like a sort of greenish glow, and you would have that sort of reflected in like the folds and armor and clothes or whatever else they're on. I don't actually use OSL that much anymore. It's not sort of stylistically what I like to do, but it's good to practice.
So I interrupted you, and you were right in the middle of talking about that process. But I just don't want to go on without letting people know.
Right. So sorry, I forgot. Yeah. So it's not about improving everything all at once. I don't think that's really a productive way to get better at miniature painting. It's about doing the work that you want to do on most of it, and then picking something that you are experimenting with or want to improve on or something like that, and just a little thing that you want to get better at, and then do that on that one model, and then next time pick something else. So you're not always constantly working on the same thing, and later you can come back to that, and maybe you just want to do that better. I remember one time I wanted to hand blend like really complicated cloths. And so like I had spent a while like building up to like sort of hand blending, where you sort of blending, it's a technique. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's complicated. But I wanted a really hand blended but painterly quality to a really complicated piece of cloth with like a large amounts of folds and shadows and curvature to it. And that's actually what I've come to enjoy about miniature painting, really, is like I like organic, I like doing skin, I like doing cloth. Not so much metal, but
Space Marines.
Yeah, I have not been in like 20 years.
Yeah, why stick with 40K if you like organic and cloth? I mean, there's
other. I really like demons, and demons are all pretty much organic.
Yeah. Okay.
The rubric Marines are not, and they're sort of tedious to paint. That's not true. They're extraordinarily tedious to paint. Right. But also there's a whole lot of like sort of filigree and stuff that you can get drawn into and have fun with.
Yeah.
Christopher, what were some of your questions?
Well, so related to all that, I mean, what is your biggest frustration when you come back to, like, some people hate eyes, some people hate parts of basing because they feel like it never gets done. Seems like you enjoy it. Some people hate doing hair, or some people just hate doing that finish wash stuff because they feel like it messes up their paint qualities. Do you have a frustration that keeps coming up for you?
Well, first off, if you feel like your wash is messing stuff up, it's probably time to rethink a few things.
Right.
So like,
so answer both. Give the.
Let's start with the wash.
Yeah.
if you're like, hey, I like did a lot of this stuff and now I like put a wash on and like everything's kind of blended together again and this doesn't seem like great. Um, one of the great things about washes is they'll hide a lot of mistakes. And in doing stuff, they're naturally going to bring everything sort of to a more equal sort of value level. And so what you can do, and it's easier said than done, is you can push your contrast a lot more because a lot of this is going to be evened out. And in sort of advanced painting techniques, a lot of times what you're doing is you're sort of doing this work on your own without a wash and creating a lot of many layers, and you're sort of just step by step, very thin layers, very like I've heard people describe it as sort of you're using water with a memory of paint in it, like you're using extremely dilute sort of glazes to create this very homogeneous effect. And then you're even going back and adding more glazes on top of those glazes to create even more sort of homogeneity to that. But when if you're painting in a sort of like 1, 2, 3, where you've got your shadow, midtone, and highlights, and you sort of paint that all on, and then you wash, and it all looks basically the same. It's because your steps are too small. You're painting with all midtones essentially, and you can push highlights and shadows a lot farther than you think you can. Although that's a lot easier said than done, because when you start painting with really dark shadows and really high highlights to create this sort of contrast that you know is going to look good, and it will look good. It looks very dramatic and it looks fantastic. But it also there's a high skill level to that is learned through time. It's not easy to just push contrast. Like a lot of times when people are like, hey, how can my mini be better? It would be like, well, you need more contrast. But it's not just painting contrast. That's not how it works, because naturally when you're painting contrast, you're increasing the amount of shift that you have to do from light to dark. And making that look good is a big part of mini painting, and why it's such a skill to learn. Like especially when you have to go from, in minis, if you want to go from like almost white to almost black over the course of 3 millimeters, like that's a very specific skill that most even like professional painters don't have, because they would never need to do that. So it has to be developed specifically for miniature painting. In terms of frustration,
for you personally,
yeah, I'm not usually frustrated by things. I don't enjoy painting really big things. I don't enjoy like big tanks and stuff. Like it's just boring and I get bored. So, and especially lately, or at least the last few years, I've really gone away from using an airbrush too much. And I really prefer to just like hand blend and sort of get in the zone of just doing that. And it gives a more painterly quality, which I really enjoy. But it's really long and tedious to just paint like large flat panels and just hand blend them. So yeah, that's something I do not enjoy.
Yeah, I
fill them with freehand.
I still consider myself a beginner, but like I don't. I have an airbrush, but I basically only use it for like priming and a little bit of my finer thing for a little bit of OSL. And I've realized I don't want to really use my airbrush for much else other than those two things. Like
there are times where I will use, like when I painted Magnus, who was even though it's like a year and a half ago now, it's my most recent big model that I've done, and that was a lot of airbrush, just because you can achieve, especially with like Magnus, for people who don't know, is about 12 inches tall altogether. Right. So we're far out of the realm of normal miniatures. This is like a statue at this point. Right. And so yeah, I don't really want to hand blend all of that, and Games Workshop especially tends to have so much sort of going on and create such busy models that like the hand blending is going to get lost anyway. You're never going to notice it. So
Yeah.
I will use airbrushing to knock out like big things. Also, like unlike Magnus's wings, they go through the whole rainbow progression. So like I don't want to hand blend that. That's that's obnoxious.
Yeah.
Hand blending a rainbow is, I can do it. I don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, so since we're talking about Games Workshop, I feel like I keep just trying to take them down, but I'm not. I think a lot of their stuff's fun. It feels like sometimes people get into the contrast paints that they offer and just use that as their shortcut to what would you say to people who are like, see, I did it in 2 steps because the contrast paints are amazing, but then they get frustrated because they can't start to get the detail that they see in others. That is a very big leading question, and I know I'm asking it, but what would you say to those people?
I have a confession. I've never used contrast paints.
Okay.
Because again, I mean, by the time they came out, they're not really for me, right? They're not.
Right.
They're applications for like a really experienced painter is pretty limited. So I've never really been able to buy them. I will say to the general question that, like, if you want to use contrast paints, if you want to get an army painted, like, yeah, great, do it. Like, awesome. Like, I don't. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing lost by like having like a cool shortcut, and the paints are like technically really cool. There's like, I also have a lot to say about Games Workshop in certain respects, but like, no, those are cool paints. Like, I'm glad they exist, but there is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, maybe get more into it because again, my point isn't to like drag their name through the mud. My point is more like, why do you think for you, with your experience, that limited scope is there? Would you explain that to somebody? Because I think that's where some people don't understand. Well, I painted 50 stormtroopers or 50 Marines or whatever, and now I want to start getting in more detail work, and I've been using these fine over here. How do I start? And that's where they don't realize that. I feel like personally, those contrast paints might be holding them back a little bit.
I don't know if they're. Yeah. So,
and again, that's my personal feeling on it. But I think that I do think that they're a good product, but I don't think it should be the only product in somebody's arsenal who's learning. And that's what I was maybe saying. Could you speak to?
Yeah. Again, it really depends so much on what you want out of like your painting. So, like if you want to improve as a painter, the reason contrast paints are so limited is because they're sort of always going to flow basically the same way over the same surface. And so you can't do a lot of customization in terms of like where I want my lighting to come from, where I want my shadows to be, and even like more color theory wise, like why I want my like this brown to have like a very bluish gray shadow instead of like this just straight brown shadow. And it's really hard to sort of overlap these things and achieve like these really sort of intricate variations in color with just contrast paints. And I'm not sure that I think if people are looking to improve in painting and they're just using contrast paints, they can actually do a lot because they can learn, like if they're just doing it and wanting to improve, they can learn a lot through like brush control and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And brush control is super important. Like that's really one of the main building blocks of how you get better is learning to be able to control a brush in such a small area. But at the same time, if I would tell people if they're using contrast paints and they're knocking out stuff and they're like, I want to do more. Yeah, maybe we can start to sort of experiment with other things. And it's all a toolkit. And so for me, contrast paints I know there are some sort of professional painters who do use them in sort of very specific things, but again, it's about expanding your repertoire. It's about every time you paint something, wanting to do something a little better.
Yeah. Cool.
Which brings me to my question. Is color theory more important than technique? And tell me I can continue ignoring color theory and flourish as a painter.
So
I have plateaued.
I guess I'm not asking the leading questions. Hilarious.
This is actually interesting because I hadn't thought about it, right? But the thing I was thinking about is color theory is probably one of the easiest routes to make really decent miniature painting. I think a really basic technique with like a really good color theory background is gonna yield better results than like a really high level technique. Like you can do all the blending and like cool weathering effects or whatever, or OSL or translucent fabric or freehand you want, but if your color theory is not there, it's still not going to look great. Whereas if you can have like a really solid color theory and like a pretty decent like learned brush control, you can do really amazing miniatures with a really small effect. So I would say actually I've never thought about it this way before, but color theory is probably more important. And here's the good thing about this. Color theory way easier to learn than technique, right? There's not that much.
My wife dresses me.
Fair.
Like, you know, some people start at 0 and I'm like behind 0.
That's fair. For the unfortunately like colored hindrant among us, this might be more difficult, but I think if you could follow some pretty simple rules and have like some good ideas.
So
what would rule number 1 be? Text you questions?
If yeah, if you're in a group chat with me, yeah, just go ahead and shoot that text off. That'll be super simple.
For listeners, what would rule number 1 be?
So I think the most important part, especially if we're talking about color from a grand sort of design perspective, if you're like planning the colors you want to paint a mini or an army or stuff like that, one of the things that's really important is you sort of narrow in where your colors are going to fall. And hold on. So I have my color wheel made in college, art school, well worth like $30,000. And so I'll send Chris a link to like a color wheel that has like value and saturation on it instead. But one of the things you can do is, let's see, hold on, let me get my bearings. So if we got like a sort of green, yellow, orange, and then we've got this sort of triadic color sphere here, and then we could maybe dip down here to a contrasting color in purple. We can sort of think about drawing like a triangle here, and everything color we use, we want to fall into that triangle. It's going to make like a really cohesive sort of argument. It's easier to show on like a color wheel that has like values.
Sure.
Also invest in a color wheel. Like when I did art school and I was like, here's a color wheel. I'm like, why do I need to make a color wheel? I know what the color wheel looks like. It's actually super useful to pull out a color wheel and be like, all right, yeah, because you can sort of visualize it.
Yeah.
Also, like another super useful thing is to make swatches of your paint. Just pull out a piece of paper, put down a little block of color. It doesn't have to be like super organized or super neat. Just label what it is, and you fill out a whole bunch of sheets of those for all the paints you have. And then when you're painting and you've sort of got like a cohesive thing, you can look into your colors and you've got what they look like painted, and so you can just pull it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that sometimes people don't realize is the color. And this sounds so simple, but the color in the bottle isn't going to match the color on the mini, and the
Right.
color on the mini is going to look different based on what's underneath it or how much water thinning or whatever other thinner, spit, or whatever that you used, right?
And it looks different in context with the other colors that surround it.
Yep.
Like when I do super high contrast painting, like if you had like a color that I'm like using as like a brightest highlight, it will look almost white on a mini. But if you put it like next to a thing, it would be like a fairly dingy like beige.
Yeah.
But in the context of the mini, it's going to look very bright white.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've just been using linen white the whole time.
I mean, linen white's a great color. I'm not going to lie. I love linen white.
No burgundy wine.
I love burgundy wine.
That's the best color.
It's a great color. Yeah. So there's also like there's not that many sort of there's not that many sort of like ways to really color scheme a thing. I mean, there are like a ton of ways, but in the variances, but like you take like two colors, you take like contrasting color, you take colors fairly next to each other or a color adjacent on the color wheel. You take triads of colors. You take two colors that are kind of adjacent and one opposite color that's sort of in the middle. And then you play with saturation and value. And if you kind of keep everything when you're doing it in this sort of triangle, it's going to be pretty cohesive. I think one of the things that people, I think, when they're like painting, because when you're painting miniatures, there's a lot of neutral colors that are sort of naturally like evoked because there's a lot of like wood or leather, just gray stone or whatever. There's a lot of neutral colors, and a lot of times people are like, why doesn't this look right? And it's because like all those neutral colors have like a warm tone or a cool tone, which if you're not like super color aware, you might not notice. So like you can have a warm gray or you can have a cool gray, and if your whole miniature is cool and you have this like warm gray like sticking out, it's gonna look kind of weird because like this gray has a sort of warmish undertone where the rest of the model is very cool. And you can play off these sort of cool warm contrast a lot, but if it's only done like very sparingly and without thought, it's gonna look weird to the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta strip a lot of models now. No, I know it's wrong.
Oh, hey, good idea. Don't strip models.
What would you suggest instead? Because a lot of people do when they're learning.
I know, and there's an argument for it if you have like a very limited amount of models. I would say most people who are in the hobby have plenty of unpainted models. And you should probably paint those rather than stripping old ones. Like,
sure. Well, like I'm playing Crisis Protocol and I'm going through those. Those are pretty expensive models, just like Warhammer. to yeah. So like 2 for $40 is expensive. For what are they, 28 millimeter, whatever. So how would you say? How would you encourage preservation of the model without like having to completely strip it then? Or I don't know. That's a weird question, but how can you?
You've invested a lot in this model, monetary and time, and you're like, this is not very good. I can do better.
Yeah.
But do you have other things that you can do better on that you spent just as much money on?
Yeah.
Probably. And like, you know what? You learn from that. It's a process. You can grow from it. And what are you really gaining from like spending the time to strip this down and paint over, because like how much have you grown since you just painted this model? Like is a thing, right? Like if you just painted this stuff, like yeah, you can probably do a better job, but like how much better is it going to be? Like if you really really like this something, if you really really like this models, if you really really like this game that you're playing with them, like come back in 2 years maybe and strip them down then.
Yeah.
But like I think it's a good idea not to strip, because it also limits like your sort of sense of progress if you're just starting over all the time, right? If you can look back and be like, hey, this is where I was 6 months ago and here's where I am now, like that's actually like a pretty big motivator for continuing to paint.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't actually strip models. The only models I strip are Hot Wheels cards.
Me too.
Because I have a shameful amount of unpainted minis.
Me too.
And that's why you're excited about the Reaper minis coming in April, right? Right.
They're spiders, okay, and spiders are fun to paint and easy.
Sure.
We'll see though, because one of them's like big shalabish.
I would want to do like too much freehand for spiders, I think.
No, I just have to tease you because you just said you're excited about your minis coming, and then you also say I have way too many minis. So
I have some of AJ's painted Reapers. This Dagon statue.
you'll have to send me a picture of that.
This is never going to do it.
Yeah. You're going to have to send a picture to include in the
also,
YouTube
like, yeah, it's like a 30-minute paint job. So
we'll say this is AJ. He's our expert for the week. Yeah. Yep.
Wasn't one of the first when you got into painting, AJ? I'm remembering it now. You were, because we didn't have like a lot of minis when you got into it. Nobody, like, you know, and I remember you asking for minis, and I gave you some of those skull pillars that I think were lead.
Yeah. Didn't you get those back? I painted those for you.
Yeah, they're somewhere. But yeah, they're the only miniature I've never been able to identify. They're like two little lead pillars that are just covered in skulls, and he did a fantastic job. AJ had just started painting on his journey, and he still paints skulls better then than I do now. It's frustrating.
That's awesome.
Like 10 years.
You know, TSR for a while was doing lead minis, and I wonder if that's what those are.
Well, that was all through Cincinnati, so, or maybe TSR.
They made some stuff here in Cincinnati back when Hasbro was.
TSR was licensed through Raul Partha, which is now Iron Wind Miniatures.
Oh, and they're here in Cincinnati, right?
Yeah, they're over in Cincinnati.
Yeah. But they had, the only reason I know this is I used to be huge into Star Wars figures and stuff, and some of the people that used to do the casting for both companies were based here in Cincinnati, and they used to write about it. So
I'll have to send Christopher the Steve Saunders sculpt. Some of the little known fact about Cincinnati, since one of the biggest miniature manufacturers was in Cincinnati through the like 70s and 90s, it's actually home to a couple of miniature sculptors, including Steve Saunders, who a group of guys that we gamed with commissioned a sculpt of our friend.
Yeah. No. I know about this. He's riding the wolf.
And he's riding the wolf, and he would never take his shirt off, nor would he ride a wolf. But in the sculpt, he is shirtless and riding a wolf, and AJ painted it.
Oh, that's
I can talk about that. I can send you some pictures of it.
I remember the conversations about when you guys were having it commissioned. So I must have moved right before you decided to paint it, AJ. Yeah, I'd love to see it. So
Yeah, I can. I'll send you like the whole 360 view of it. Um, yeah, it's a cool mini.
oh, that's
Like
fantastic.
that was when I was like, I don't know. I go through a lot of phases of we
I'm still here.
okay.
You go through a lot of phases
Of sort of stylistic changes in my miniature painting because I'm just drawn to like whatever I want at the time. And like that time I was in like a very what is there's a French company, they went out of business. They made amazing sculpts.
oh
Ragnarok.
Yeah, the Ragnarok guys.
yeah.
Forget their name, but their studio style was like a very, it was not like other studios because it wasn't high contrast. It was very like sort of low contrast muted, and I was like really digging that sort of vibe at the time. And so like the Wolf Riders and sort of a very that sort of vibe. It has some cool freehand on it too. It was probably some of the better freehand I've done.
Nice. I'll be looking forward to sharing that. So
AJ, what game are you looking forward to play the most once you can? And is it Wizard Staff related? No. What game are you looking forward to play the most?
I would love to play some Wizard Staff. All I want to play is Gaslands. I have so much fun playing Gaslands with you, and I don't know what it is about that game. I just love Gaslands so much, and I haven't normally like recently like when we've been playing it. I haven't had like a real urge to do a lot of like painting with cards because again, it's not really like my what I want to do with these sort of organic sort of shaped stuff. But lately, lately, I have been really wanting to rust up some cars, do some post-apocalyptic weathering, and I just really love playing Gaslands.
It is a lot of fun. I still need to make a portable ramp for the game. That's the one thing I'm missing with the new ed of rules is jumping.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That sounds cool. Do you only?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna plug AJ's gaming again. What are you ranked on in MTGO right now?
It's a new season. I'm not high. Also, it's a new season, and I'm like plat 2 right now. Platinum like 2. It's hard for me to rank up
The best.
What
is Platinum 2 the best rank, the highest?
No,
I don't play MTGO, so
each rank has 4. Each color medal has like 4 ranks. So there's like plat 4, plat 3, plat 2, plat 1, and then diamond, and then mythic. Mythic doesn't have like number system. You're just in mythic, and then if you're high enough, you get top 1200. I'm like plat 2 right now. The season starts over every month. But I'm having a hard time ranking it up because I just want to keep playing my cats deck. I just want to play cats all day, every day. Don't care.
That's kind of why I stopped playing Magic, was because I loved certain decks, and then when stuff just kept changing out, I was like, what's the point of leaving behind the stuff I loved? Because I loved huge green monsters or like burn decks, like old school huge green monsters and burn decks. And then those became kind of irrelevant. And yeah, there's new tropes of those, but they're not the same, right?
I don't know. I was like top. I was like one. I finished the season like 150 with just dumb green stuff like a couple months ago. So,
well, that's awesome.
Everything will come around. Everything old will be new again at some point in Magic.
That's sweet. So you're playing
as with
Magic?
all game.
What were you saying, Ryan?
Nothing. No, irrelevant.
Okay, so you're playing Magic. You're playing Gaslands. Did you play 40K at all, or just paint it?
No, I played 40K.
You did play it?
Especially, I played it with Ryan a lot. 40K, I've come to appreciate in its own way. Um, for miniature games in general, like I played I played a lot, and then like I was into Warmachine for a while, and the competitive aspect was nice, but now that's not really what I want in a miniature game anymore. I just want to I want to paint some dudes, go like throw them on the table, like have some fun, like drink some beers, not take anything too seriously, and then like look at some cool stuff like on the table, and
Yeah.
that's all I really want from a miniatures game anymore. So
Yeah.
40K does fill that in some respects. It's just so like poorly balanced that it's like I built what I thought was like a really fun Thousand Suns Chaos Demons list, but then like against Ryan's like Gene Stealer Cold, it's just like there's no way for Ryan to win that game. Basically, like it's not.
Painted a
There's
lot of models to put right back into my bag.
that's right. And it's not like there's no strategic. It's not like me being like a great strategist or Ryan being bad at it. It's just like the way that like my army was constructed, there's just no way for his army to ever compete with it. It just doesn't work.
That
So
yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all. I'm just gonna say like
it wasn't.
Yeah.
But like a lot of, I think for me, mini games in some respects are, I think the ones that I enjoy anyway now, they're so like casual and laid back that like all gaming is sort of about friendship and
Yeah.
the sort of experience of just like being around people. Right. And so like I always it's nice when like someone just doesn't have to lose because the game's bad. But
Yeah.
it's also nice when like people aren't encouraged to be like super try hard about it because like, who cares? Like
right.
let's just hang out and drink some beers. And I think miniature gaming more so than like board games or card games encourage that sort of communal aspect because you're all just sort of standing around the table, you're chucking some dice, you can have some beers, like whatever, it's fine. Like there's not like a ton of like because like in a board game you're always sort of analyzing and like constructing things and like outside of like really competitive miniature games there's strategy but it's not like super complex. Like you don't have to be like a master tactician like thinking about everything that's going on most of the time. You can just chill.
I think it depends on what board game you're playing, but
That's true.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, Ryan and I tend towards the heavier GMT, super analyzed stuff, but
AJ is my Cold War game Twilight struggle buddy.
Oh, nice, cool. I so I'll tell both of you, even though O'Leary already heard this today. So I was looking for a game that I totally forgot that I had pre-ordered back at the beginning of the P500, and I realized I had already paid for it today. But in the midst of that, there is a new Twilight Struggle game coming out that is like a 20 to 30 minute Twilight Struggle game. So I will hopefully have more info for you later on, but it is by one of the I think it's by one of the two designers of the original game. And
hesitantly excited.
I know, right? I didn't even look at what it was really about, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta get that." So, because I play tons of Twilight Struggle against the AI now. I'm not any better at it, but I love that game on computer.
And I will say for listeners, the P500 is kind of like GMT's Kickstarter program, but not really exactly like that at all.
Yeah, because they're not going to run away with your money and not give you something.
But so they just fill up a pre-order list for like 500 copies, and then once they hit 500, they print it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Is that how it works?
Yep. They're not going to run away with your money anywhere. Yep. They're a great company.
I love G&T.
Yeah, unless you want like beautiful miniatures, like we've been talking about for most of this last hour. So they
AJ,
are,
do you mind?
yeah.
Sorry, AJ, this ties in a lot of our previous episodes. How do you feel about a game? Does it need miniatures? Obviously, miniature games do, but and Blood Rage doesn't. But it's better because of it. But how do you feel about miniatures in games that could very much as easily use wooden cubes?
I have to say, I'm not a huge fan. It's not like, I don't know, like I don't super care about it. Like, I don't know, if they want miniatures, that's fine. It makes games like way more expensive than they otherwise would be, which I think is a downside. If they're not like adding like a really like, because I think, all right, here's the thing, right? Because in board games, there's like a very, I'm not usually excited to paint board game pieces. Like, um, and I think part of that is because I don't have like I've never had in my life of like, I've been playing games for a long time. I've never had a board game where I'm gonna repeatedly play it enough that like I think painting miniatures is gonna bring like that much value to me. Um, like whereas like when I was like in the heyday of like Warmachine or something, like I'd play that like once or twice. Well, I'd have once or twice a week sessions where I'd play it 3 or 4 times a day, and I'd do that for years. Like, I've never done that with a board game before, and so like it seems weird to sort of like put, especially if I want to paint board game miniatures, I want to do a good job. And if I'm going to do a good job, it's going to take time, and I'm going to spend more time painting the miniatures in the board game than I'm ever going to spend playing it. And while I have done that for a very specific board game, what?
Is it Blood Rage?
No, no, it's Dreadfleet.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah. This is a GW game, doesn't count.
I have a beautifully fully painted set of Dreadfleet. It's spectacular. Which I've never played, but I just really like the models for it. I wanted to paint them.
Yeah.
Whereas most board games, at least any board game I've been interested in playing, they might have a couple models and I'm interested, but I don't want to like paint the entire thing. But again, like I'm not every person, and some people got their own things and they want them. And I know a lot of people really like the miniatures in board games. Like I just like, they don't add much for me.
All right.
Agreed.
Are you playing anything?
And you can't paint the dice in a trophy buck.
Can't paint the dice in what?
A trophy buck. Is that what it's called? Trophy buck? Buck hunter? The Steve Jackson dice game. That's AJ's favorite game.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, trophy buck. It's not my favorite game.
I forgot. I totally forgot about that game. Okay. Are you playing anything else right now? You and your fiance, or?
No, like with COVID and stuff. Just I've just been playing like a bunch of Magic on Arena, and then like the last few days I got into speed cubing a lot.
What is that?
I guess it's a game. I don't know. It's a puzzle. It's a toy. It's like game related, like Rubik's Cube.
Okay.
Like I've been able to solve a Rubik's Cube for like 20 years, but I've never been fast at it. And I'm like, you know what? It's the sort of thing that I get where like when I'm like, I want to paint well, and I'm like, I want to solve a Rubik's Cube fast. I'm gonna do it now. So
speed cubing. Okay, cool.
Nope.
Hey, I mean, you know what? We used to sell at the game and toy store I worked at. We used to sell tons of different kinds of Rubik's cubes, and some people like that's their jam. They love it. They'll do the 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s. They get into it.
6s are a terrible cube.
I want to know.
My official position: 6s terrible cube.
Okay. Why is it a terrible cube?
Well, first of all, most 6s aren't very good cubes. They're just not like, I don't know what, for whatever reason, they don't lend themselves to particularly good cubes. But also, it's if you're trying to do like fast solves, it's particularly less luck based because there's a lot of different cases of parity, which isn't really important. It's just that it takes extra time to solve, and whether you get them or not is very luck dependent. So it's
Yeah.
bad cube. Speak your chat.
All right. Well, I appreciate anything else you want to share with us before we go tonight.
No, thanks so much for having me on. It's been great.
I'm really glad.
I've really enjoyed it, AJ. I love seeing your face. It brings joy to my heart.
Always.
Awesome.